IATA Annual General Meeting at the World Air Transport Summit. Great to have such super attendance at this event. Hope you enjoyed the last few days. Last chance to ask some questions of our esteemed panel, which consists of Pieter Elbers, the Chair of the Board of Governors and CEO of IndiGo. We have Yvonne Makolo, who is the immediate past Chair of the IATA Board of Governors and CEO of RwandAir, and Willie Walsh, the Director General of IATA. Same drill as yesterday. Raise your hand, please identify yourself before you make your question, and we'll try and get as many questions in as possible. So if you can keep your questions short and concise, and also if you can keep them on industry level issues, that would be much appreciated. Who wants to ask the first question? We'll go over here.
A lot of networking, a lot of talking, but what's the outcome for the consumer and the passenger of this AGM?
Well, I think the consumer, passenger, should have heard nearly every member of an airline or airline-related activity explain how important they are to the business that we operate and how we strive every minute of every day to deliver a service that they're looking for. And I think that's supported by the research that we've done recently, indicating the number of our customers globally who are happy with the flights that they've experienced and look forward to flying with us again. And I think they can also hear very strongly the commitment the industry is making to our journey to net zero in 2050, which is important for everybody. The end consumer obviously wants to see us do that, wants to see us do it in the most efficient way possible. And I think the ongoing and united position that the industry has in relation to achieving net zero in 2050 is very important.
Okay, we'll take the next question, maybe over here.
Yeah, we know a figure on how many airports have SAF supply that are going into aircraft right now, and I'm assuming that number is pretty small. What needs to be done? Why aren't there more? What needs to be done to amp that up?
If you could just identify yourself.
Oh, sorry, Robert Self with Travel Weekly, US.
Sorry, was that SAF supply?
Yeah.
Yeah.
SAF delivery.
Well, it's not really the role of the airport. So maybe.
Well, I meant SAF delivery, putting it on aircraft.
Yeah. So the beauty of SAF is that it's a drop-in fuel. So it can just be blended in with the traditional fuel that's delivered to the airport. So no additional infrastructure is required, no investment is required by the airport. All of the existing fuel systems at every airport around the world is capable of blending SAF with the traditional fuel. And that's why it's such an important element for us, because it's a product that can be used immediately, doesn't require any infrastructure investment, and can be used on the technology that we're operating, the aircraft that we're operating today. As we move forward and look to transition to things like hydrogen power, that will require significant investment in infrastructure, and even hybrid electric will require significant investment in infrastructure at the airports and a change to the way airports operate. But SAF can be delivered into the existing fuel systems at every airport, everywhere in the world. What we need is the fuel suppliers to supply the fuel to the airport. That's where we have the challenge, is getting greater production of SAF from the fuel producers to deliver that into the airport. The airports are already capable, willing, and part of the solution. They're not part of the problem.
Okay, next question. Maybe we'll go to Sandy on the side. Yeah, right there. Yes, on the side.
Thank you. Chris Urginer from Green Air News. Willie, there was an interesting and lively debate this morning in the net zero session. There was some disagreement between yourself and the panelists on the global SAF target for 2030. not in favour of such a target. Can you just sort of clarify your position?
That's not what I said. What the speaker said was IATA pushed for it, and I said we did not push for it. There's a very important difference between IATA working to achieve these targets and pushing to achieve a target that we don't believe is going to be possible, or at least as I expressed in my speech, would be very ambitious. And it's important to stress that the target was a target set by governments. When we look at the SAF that's in production and the SAF that can potentially be delivered between now and 2030, we have a concern that that 5% target cannot be achieved on a global basis. In fact, we know, for example, there's no SAF production in Latin America. None. We see SAF production in some parts of the world, and we see investments in SAF production in most parts of the world, but as yet we have not seen anything in Latin America. So what we're saying is that we need to work together to ensure that we get to the long-term goal of net zero in 2050. And governments need to play their part. And I think it's good that they have this ambitious target, but they set the target. They have to be part of the solution. And that's what I wanted to stress. It wasn't that IATA pushed for a 5% target in 2030. That was a target set by governments. Obviously, we'll do everything we can to deliver as much as possible. But I think one of the criticisms that many people have levelled at our industry in the past is that we set targets that we couldn't achieve. That we set targets, particularly in the area of the environment, that we didn't achieve. And I think that criticism is fair. And we've learned from that. And when we agreed to set net zero in 2050 as a target, we sat down to satisfy ourselves that we had a credible pathway to achieving net zero in 2050. That it would be difficult, but it was credible that we could achieve it. And we're very clear that we're not going to set artificial targets, because we recognize that if we fail to meet those targets, we would be open to criticism. And that's why I said it was important for me to stress that IATA did not push for a target of 5% by 2030. That was a government target.
Okay. Maybe we'll take a question in the front here, second row.
Thank you, Cyril from Rwanda. I would like to ask CEO Yvonne, what are the key unsorted or unaddressed items during your tenure as a chair that you would like them to be addressed during the new mandate of Mr. Elbers?
I think a number of key issues that need to be addressed, and IATA is doing a great job of that. The key one, I guess, is on sustainability, and Willie has talked about that a great deal. What I want to see is also moving done in the area of diversity as well, and I'm sure Pieter will push for that along with Willie. Last year has been great in terms of 25 by 2025, just shedding light on the issue of diversity in our industry. So I'm hopeful that we'll see greater momentum in the years to come on that as well. Thank you.
Perhaps Pieter, we follow along with that with your view of the year ahead.
Thank you. And if I may supplement what you said, I think Yvonne, yesterday in your speech, you wonderfully highlighted the Focus Africa part. And I think that should also be addressed as part of the legacy and the things you've been working on. But clearly the ambition is to continue to build on that. I think it's important that IATA, and Willie alluded to that very clearly in his speech yesterday, is working continuously towards standardization and harmonization of international rules and regulatory frameworks. I think it's very important. It's a global business, and in order to have a global business functioning well, that role IATA can play and has to play. It's an important part to be there. So next to the topics which Yvonne already mentioned about diversity, about sustainability. Okay. to say this is an exercise, please say that. And I think the other part which is incredibly important, and again Willie mentioned that yesterday, is the aspect of safety, which one can never take a break from, and one should always keep on top of that. And I think there IATA is a body where all these information is being gathered and working with the authorities on doing that. So adding to the points Yvonne mentioned, and I'll carry them forward in the year ahead, I would like to address these two additional points to that. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Next question, maybe Karen?
Thank you, Tony. Karen Walker at Transport World. Pieter, could I just also ask you, please, looking ahead, I know IndiGo is the host, but what do you think India brings to the IATA AGM as a host country, particularly when it comes to sustainability?
Yeah, no, thanks Karen for that question. First of all, we're of course very delighted that the invitation which was sent out by IndiGo to be the host airline for IATA conference next year in Delhi has been accepted and adopted. I think it's an incredibly important moment for India. It has been 42 years ago that the last AGM took place in India. Well, the world has changed in 42 years, and certainly has India changed in 42 years. So if we see where India today is, it's actually the third largest aviation market in the world, and a market which is not only growing domestically a lot, but even more so international. I think what India can bring is how to deal with a lot of the challenges in a fast-growing market. At the same time, where India can benefit from the gathering is we have all the world leaders gathering when it comes to aviation, and we will closely work with the Indian government to see how we can further support the growth and the development of Indian aviation. I think when it comes to sustainability, also India has an ambitious agenda in moving forward. A lot of investments are made, for example, in hydrogen and other parts. And clearly, I think the knowledge and the expertise of the world gathering in India next year will help to further exchange that process. Maybe it's also good to highlight, and speaking about what does aviation bring, and Willie called it yesterday the freedom of travel. I think one of his predecessors called it in the past, aviation as a force for good. And that's what we see back actually very much in India. So what aviation brings to society in terms of jobs, in terms of opportunities, in terms of exchange, in terms of benefit for the smaller and more remote communities, that's really something where it's very, very visible. I think India will have a fantastic opportunity next year to show this to the world actually, what do you call it, the freedom of travel or aviation as a force for good, to demonstrate what that brings and how smaller communities can be included in the larger economic development of that. Lastly, I think there's a lot of activities being done in order to support the different communities in the country itself. For example, and I will step away a bit here from IATA, but mention some of the sort of women empowerment things we're doing in the country itself. I think that's a wonderful showcase we can show to the world and probably hopefully inspire others in taking those examples going forward. So all in all, and sorry for a bit of a longer answer, Karen, but I think it's a wonderful opportunity to have IATA AGM next year in Delhi. It will be a development perspective, the right time to do that after 42 years, but also for all the other fields we discussed on sustainability, inclusion, economic benefits. I think it's going to be a very exciting AGM going forward.
Thank you. Maybe a question here?
Makolo from Sunday Times. Just coming back to the SAF debate here, forgive me for putting it quite so bluntly, but it feels like we're kind of in a bit of a holding pattern, pardon the pun. We have governments saying, we want you to do this. The airlines sort of saying, I guess we're going to have to do this because you're telling us we didn't push for it. And government saying it's the responsibility of industry to deliver this and to come up with an answer among themselves, and airlines and the aviation sector saying we need help from the governments. I mean, what needs to happen to break this whole cycle?
No, I don't think that's a proper characterization of where we are. What we're saying as an industry is, if you look, and Scott Kirby made a very good point yesterday, if you look at the transition to cheap solar and cheap wind energy, it happened with government support. It didn't just happen because there was an industry there who wanted to make it work. It happened because there was a framework in place that governments put in place and supported to ensure that the investment was made and that those industries could be scaled up to the point where now it's cheaper to use electricity from solar and wind than it is from the traditional sources. And his point was very accurate as well. It's not a linear increase. And people, I think, have made the mistake of trying to get from where we are today to 2050 along a straight line. And we're very clear that what we need to see is similar to the transition to clean electricity. You need to see the investment, and the investment is being made in many parts of the world, particularly in the US, and that the growth, once we've seen all of these new projects come into fruition, will be exponential. It's not going to be linear. So I think we're aligned. As an industry, as I said, we're conscious of the fact that we don't want to make promises we can't deliver on, because I think we've been rightly criticised in the past, and we're not going to promise to achieve something that we don't believe is possible. I believe that 5% SAF in 2030 is extremely ambitious. I think it will be achieved and maybe even exceeded in certain parts of the world. But when we look at where SAF is being produced and where investments are being made, it's very clear to us it won't be achieved in every part of the world. And that's where we need to be honest. And I think there's a risk that we have this figure of 5% and then in 2030 you look at it and you say, well, in Latin America it's only been 1% and we're critical of Latin America. I think that's unfair. And that's why we have to have this debate and we have to be honest about the debate. And as an industry, we're honest. We're committed to net zero in 2050. We know it's going to be difficult. We know there will be challenges. We know it's going to be expensive. But we're determined to get there. And how we get there, we've identified one pathway. We've analysed 14 others, and I think there will be many other opportunities. But the good thing is the end goal is totally aligned. Governments, industry, everybody is aligned on net zero in 2050. And I think people use the running analogy. This is a marathon. We're 2 steps into the marathon, but we've headed off in the right direction. And well, you know me. I believe in being open and honest and direct in the comments that I make. And I think it's important that we have that debate and we can get everybody in the room. I think the panel this morning was excellent in that we were able to bring fuel producers, both traditional and new sustainable, with regulators, with governments, with the industry, and have an honest discussion about it. And an honest discussion will and should demonstrate that there's some disagreement as well. So I thought it was great. I was really pleased to have the opportunity to participate in it from the floor. But the important message here is that everybody is aligned to achieve that target of net zero 2050, and we will do it. I think there's growing confidence. We had this discussion at the Board of Governors. There's growing confidence that we will get there, recognizing that it's going to be challenging, but that we will get there.
We will take a question in the middle. Okay,
Sky Leach, Johannesburg, SFI and others. So a big issue just a few years ago was flight training, and it's still with us. I fear that a move towards SAF will displace food crops and in favour of obviously fuel crops, and I think that that would be an enormous problem for the image of the industry.
I would agree with you, and that's why it's very important that the pathways to development of sustainable aviation fuel are truly sustainable, that they're not competing with land use for food production or indeed for water use. And we're clear on that. Going forward, I think this is again where ICAO and governments have a significant role to play, and I think credit to ICAO have done a good job in making sure that there's no contradiction between pursuing sustainable fuel for aviation and maintaining sustainability in other areas as well. I talk about the airline industry saying we need financial sustainability, we need environmental sustainability, and the two go hand in hand. And governments talk about economic sustainability and environmental sustainability. But the industry is not interested in driving up food prices to produce sustainable aviation fuel, because that's not the result we want. So we're very clear that any pathway that has been approved to the production of sustainable aviation fuel takes into account the issue that we can't compete with land use for food production, and we can't compete with water use, which is obviously a scarce product in many parts of the world.
Okay, we'll take another question. Right here.
Hi, this is Anusha from Wind. Over the last few quarters, we've seen the Boeing episode coming up, and then we've also seen long periods of engine groundings with respect to Pratt & Whitney. So do you think that these two issues will have an impact, or have these issues changed how airlines engage with aircraft and engine OEMs in the future?
No, I don't. Clearly the industry is unhappy with the performance of the OEMs, and that's pretty much everybody. Elbers, GE, Rolls-Royce, Pratt & Whitney, because they've disappointed us to different degrees over recent years. Everybody's aware of the challenge that Boeing faces, given the high profile of the events that they've faced. But I think everybody's aligned again that we want to see these OEMs perform, and we need them. We need strong competition. When you only have two major airframe manufacturers, recognizing that we also have RwandAir who do an excellent job, and we have the developing industry in China with Comac, who I think are going to be critical in the future. We want to see these manufacturers perform to the standards that's expected. I'm confident, personally, from my experience in the industry over the years, that Boeing will address these issues and will get back to where they need to get back to. So, it's frustrating for airline CEOs, but we want to see them succeed, and personally I believe that they will get back to the levels of performance that the industry expects from them. I don't know if Yvonne or Pieter.
We'll move to the other side of the room for a little bit. So maybe Pina.
Hi, Dina Cameron from The National. Just to follow up on my colleague's question on supply chains, is there any thinking of leveraging IATA's collective power on behalf of its member airlines in discussions with the OEMs about, upping their game in performance issues? Is that a possibility, a position that you would like to take going forward? Have you been asked by member airlines to do so? And we understand that Stephanie Pope was here at the IATA AGM. Was there any opportunity to speak with her about these issues?
IATA operates and will and always has operated in compliance with competition laws. So we're very conscious of what it is we can and cannot do. And subject to compliance with competition laws, we are looking to see what we can do on behalf of the industry. So, for example, we have a platform in IATA that enables our airline members to investigate the supply of spare parts, which has been an issue for all airlines. So we get input from spare parts suppliers, the OEMs, everybody, into a database, and our airlines can investigate it so they can see if there's parts that they require in different parts of the world that they can get access to. We brought together a couple of months ago in Geneva a group of airlines, I think there were 17 airlines present, with the OEMs to have a discussion about the supply chain issues that we have, so that we could share views and see if there were things that we could do working together. But in the main, the relationship will continue to be between the airline and and the OEM. And that relationship is very important. It's not a relationship that IATA can or should be directly involved in. And for that reason, we will support as much as possible the industry, but we have to be conscious of the limitations on IATA as an organisation where competition rules apply. I'm sorry, the last part was with...
If you could wait for the mic.
Stephanie, yeah, I met Stephanie last night. And to her credit, she flew in following, I think everybody knows she was meeting with the FAA, but she flew in to attend the reception last night, and she was around this morning. I think she had to leave again to go back to Seattle, so she came in to reassure her customers of her determination to address their issues. I know she's been having direct conversations with all of her customers. I think everyone in the industry knows Stephanie from her time at Boeing. Personally, I was delighted to have the opportunity to talk to her and her team last night. So, everybody wants to see them succeed, and everybody wants to see her succeed in her role. And we'll support her and the team at Boeing, because it's in our interest to support her and the team at Boeing, because we want to get them back to where they need to be.
Maybe we'll take a question on this side, Tim, or next door. Perfect.
Hi, I'm Bilkis Bari from the Straits Times Malaysia. Besides sustainability and supply chain issues, what else can we expect to be discussed next year at the IATA AGM in India?
I would not like to hide away from the question, but I guess that's precisely what we're going to discuss in the next couple of Board of Governors meetings. The way it works, and you read that yesterday from the report Yvonne gave of all the Board of Governor reports and the meetings which we had throughout the year, and that eventually results in some of the statements and the resolutions and the actions which were taken and the ones which were shared yesterday. So obviously we'll be building on the topics which were mentioned already, and so supply chain is there, sustainability is there. Again, I think we should also have a broader view, and some of the questions which came up around SAF, the availability of SAF, the trade-off to be made in some places, or actually the trade-off not to be made when it comes to intervening of some of the food drops area. I think the focus on safety, especially now the skies are getting busier and busier again, and all the countries are, or I should say the vast majority of the countries, are running at levels significantly higher than the situation prior to COVID. So clearly that's going to be a continuous point of attention, and in the next couple of Board of Governors meetings we'll further prepare on what should be on the agenda and what should be shared at IATA's AGM next year in June in Delhi itself.
Okay.
Timmy from Reuters, thank you very much. Can you just clarify your position on interim targets on SAF? Just reading back your remarks last year, and from what I remember, last year I think there was some discussion about whether there should be, whether IATA should have its own interim targets. I think you told us that there was more time needed to develop a consensus on that. Is this
that hasn't changed?
So the problem is your members can't agree with each other, so you just have no interim.
No, Chip, you should have listened to what I said. So we have member airlines in Latin America, and they look around and they say, no SAF is being produced in Latin America. They look at the US, they see SAF being produced there, and Europe is different. And the problem individual member airlines have is they all want to see SAF produced, but they're very conscious of the fact that you see European airlines buying SAF in the US and transporting that SAF from the US to Europe to comply with the targets that they've set for themselves. And this is the risk. So if we had some of our colleagues, Roberto Alvo, for example, fantastic on this subject. He has set a target for SAF use for his airline but he says it's subject to me being able to get it. And he's highlighted the issue. He wants to see SAF. In fact, he's desperate to see it because he wants to be part of the solution. But he's very conscious of the fact that, you know, if he were to commit to 5% SAF in 2030, he's going to have to find it in another part of the world because he can't find it in Latin America. And that's the issue. It's not that we can't agree. It's that we're looking at where the production is and looking at how we can access that production. And the nervousness is that people see a 5% target as a target that must be achieved by every single individual airline. But we recognize this is a global issue and that some airlines actually will probably do better than 5%, but others won't have been able to access any. And we don't want them to be criticized because that criticism will be grossly unfair. We're also conscious of the fact that as an industry, you know, we're doing our own analysis of how much SAF is likely to be produced. And it's when we look at that, that we believe 5% in 2030 at a global level is very ambitious. You know, because we've taken into account where it's being produced today, where the investment is being made, when those investments are likely to translate into production. We're also conscious of the fact that, I don't know if you heard me say, you know, aviation, SAF is only 6% of renewable fuels. And while there are incentives for other forms of renewable fuels, for other forms of transport, for example, you know, we're competing with other forms of transport to get renewable fuels. Our view is that why are governments incentivizing renewable fuels for road transport when the journey for road transport is electrification? And surely it would be better to see those fuels, those feedstocks being used for aviation. But if you have an incentive to produce renewable fuel for roads, that's where you're going to see it. So I think it'd be unfair to say that we can't agree. We're completely agreed and aligned on net zero 2050. The journey will be different for each individual airline. And it's not that they can't agree on that, it's that they have to recognize the realities of the environment in which they're operating.
So if I may just take all those points completely, but at an industry level, IATA is incredibly influential. Wouldn't it be helpful for IATA to show, the industry to show leadership on a global level? I presume with all of you, I'm pretty sure, if your sales team came to you with a long-term target and declined to give you an interim target, that would be a pretty short conversation. Can't you set the tone with a little bit more of a proactive
I think using the analogy of sales is not fair.
Okay.
You're right. I'm sure if Pieter's sales director came, it would be a short conversation. But this is completely different. And I think we need to look at it in a realistic fashion. And as I said, I think we need to be honest about how challenging this transition to net zero will be. You know, politicians, you know I love politics, but you know, honesty and politics don't always go hand in hand. And therefore, you know, we don't have the freedom to make the promises and not deliver on them. We'll have to deliver on the promises we make. And airlines are conscious of the fact that in the past maybe we made promises, particularly in the environmental area, without fully analysing whether we could meet those commitments. So you know, when we agreed as an industry to a 50% net reduction, which I think we originally committed to in 2009, so it was easy for the industry to agree to it because we never actually sat down to work out how we were going to get there. We just assumed that, you know, if we would get there. When we agreed net zero in 2050, there was a debate, a discussion, a long analysis, a deep analysis of how would we get to net zero, because we weren't going to make our promise to get to net zero in 2050 unless we were able to satisfy ourselves that we had a credible pathway. And you know, that remains our position. This is too important to play around with. It's going to be a difficult journey for us to get there. But the good thing about it is, as we've said many times, we're completely aligned on that target, and we're completely aligned on the fact, more and more confident. Even, you know, on the panel discussion yesterday, I think You had 4 clear yeses and 1, what did Tim say, ish, rather than yes or no, and then clarified this issue by saying some of the things I'm saying, that it will require governments, it will require policy framework to ensure that we can get this happening. Pieter, sorry.
No, not much to add. You said, I recognize and I hear everything Willie was saying before. You said, why are they not doing an intermediate target? But precisely for all the reasons which Willie lined out, setting an intermediate target wouldn't make any sense. Because if you were to go along with what was shared earlier, that the situation in the different countries is not the same, then we have a challenge of getting it there in the first place, that SAF in itself is competing with other modalities of transportation, that SAF in itself has its challenges in terms of where is the source of income from. So if all that is there, and we have a net zero target by 2050, and we have a target which has been set by governments on that 5%, then if you buy all that, why we're not sort of going in that line, setting something in between would have made equally no sense. No, I think it's important that we collaborate with the various stakeholders. It will require a lot of work, and the work which will look differently at different parts of the world. It will require a lot of innovation on other parts, because we talk a lot about SAF. There's a lot of other things to be done, and even though it's not precisely the territory of IndiGo anymore, my territory anymore, but the European airspace and the single European sky, we're spending quite a bit of time today morning, and probably rightfully so, on SAF. We're spending 0 minutes on the fact that Europe still does not have a single European sky, which would reduce immediately any fuel consumption by 10%. And that discussion is out there for the last decade or so. So I think we should broaden, probably 2 decades, so I think we should broaden the discussion from only SAF. And SAF should be there, should have a proper in-depth discussion how it would look like. And the example which was given by European companies buying SAF in the US and then sending it by big ships to Europe to blend it, is that the SAF we want? So I think there's a holistic debate to be done, and I think that the interest of the consumer, and I like one of the first questions, the interest of the consumer for us is to have a professional debate on that, and to see how we can actually really bring it down, rather than having a long debate about targets, what should be a precise percentage and what should be a precise number. And to close, I think indeed the comparison with an intermediate fuel target would not apply to this one. So just to supplement what Willie said, and I couldn't help myself by adding that. Thank you.
Right,
and couldn't help myself by sharing the European single airspace frustration.
Okay. We're just about out of time, so we'll take one last question, and we'll do that here.
Thanks, Tony. Trying from Air Transport World, a non-SAF question. Yesterday, there's a panel urging the industry to experiment on AI. Do you think IATA should start putting together guidelines for AI? And what do you think the red lines for AI is for Air Transport? Thank you.
Well, we are working on AI, and from an IATA point of view, and you may have heard him say it yesterday, there's huge excitement around generative AI and ChatGPT when it came out first. And what we did in IATA was to put our policy in place, because the pace at which we're operating at now is incredibly fast. And I think, again, somebody said yesterday, we're already seeing the beginning of the journey with AI. So it's clear that we believe AI can have positive outcomes, and there are potential negative outcomes from AI, and we need to understand that. So I think everybody's going to be careful about how they utilize AI. The bottom line is it's going to have to center on the ethical use of AI, and that debate is a debate that's going on. But the work to understand all of that started some time ago. And there are different forms of artificial intelligence that have been in place for a long time. Predictive maintenance has been something in the industry for years and years. Machine learning has been around for years and years. So it's understanding as we move forward with the use of AI that we understand what are the opportunities and what, if any, risks are associated with it to ensure that we're not exposing ourselves or the industry to any risks associated with the use of AI.
Maybe I can add to that one. I think IATA has proven its relevance over the past many decades by standardization. So until today, we benefit from a lot of IATA initiatives. Take the slot allocation rules, and until date, I don't know how old it is, but probably 50 years plus. Until date, we benefit collectively all over the world from these standardization and procedures. I think we're at the early stages of AI, to Willie's point. But clearly, whatever we can do as IATA to help for further standardization on that, and to work closely, collaborate with governments to make sure that this is also being adapted in a way as many of the other procedures apply. I think that's where IATA can and is certainly ready to play a positive contribution to that development.
All right, well, if that's the case, then with that, we'll conclude this press conference. Thank you all very much for attending this year, and we look forward to seeing you a year from now in Delhi.